The ventilation hum was the only sound in Suite 4 when Declan heard the small footsteps. He was wiping down the adjustable chair. Last appointment logged, shelves restocked, the sandalwood and recycled air smell of the room settling into its quiet end-of-shift rhythm. He was 30 seconds from turning off the white-lined mirror lights when something tugged his sleeve. Declan Walsh, 27, station barber, wiry enough that clients sometimes asked if he actually ate, looked down. The boy was barely tall enough to reach his elbow. Copper-toned skin, a pair of tiny horns almost hidden in his curls, and a knotted blanket dragging behind him like a small defeated flag. The child pointed down the corridor, said one word, "Fix!" Declan looked at the door, looked at the boy. His quick hands, the ones that had never once hesitated over a pair of shears, set down the cloth without thinking. He followed. So the boy led him through 2 corridors and stopped at a private quarters door, pushed it open with both small palms, and looked up at Declan with an expression of absolute confidence in a plan that was entirely his own. Inside, Queen Ishvael sat before a mirror. She was tall, even seated, copper skin warm against the soft light. Dark gold eyes fixed on her own reflection with something that wasn't vanity and wasn't calm. Waist-length auburn hair lay in a tangle around her shoulders, and running through every strand were thin threads that barely pulsed, dim as embers going cold. She had a section of hair twisted in her hands. Her hands were shaking. The boy looked up at Declan. She shouldn't have noticed him at all. A station barber with a nick through his right eyebrow, standing in her doorway because a 4-year-old had pointed and said one word. She noticed him completely. There are stories that start with a child and a single word. And you already know they're going to undo someone. If that sounds like your kind of story, subscribe. This channel exists for exactly this. Ishvael was on her feet before Declan could speak. The dim threads in her hair gave a single, sharp pulse. "A barber does not touch Korvathi crown hair," she said. "Leave." Declan looked at her. Then, he couldn't help it. He looked at the hair, the magnificent, tangled, a gravity-defying disaster of auburn that had apparently been in a conflict with itself for some time. "Ma'am, with respect, your hair is staging a mutiny. I've seen engine cables more organized." Tessin giggled into his blanket, a sound small, involuntary, and immediately smothered and escaped the queen. Her jaw tightened. The gold eyes moved to her son, then back to Declan with a precision that would have been frightening if he hadn't still been thinking about the engine cables. She pointed at the door. He raised both hands, slow, peaceful, the hands of a man who had spent 15 years communicating entirely through calm. "Understood. But if you change your mind, Suite 4, I'll leave the light on." He left. The door stayed open behind him. Through it, as he walked back down the corridor, he heard nothing. Just the hum of the ship, and Tessin's voice saying something low and serious to his mother in a language Declan didn't speak. He was beneath her station, and they both knew it. He was also the only person on the ship who hadn't pretended he didn't see the tangle. The next evening, Tessin came to Suite 4 alone. He climbed into the adjustable chair with the solemn authority of someone who had made an appointment in his head, even if not on the books. He pointed at his own curls. Declan raised an eyebrow. The boy nodded once. Declan worked carefully. The copper curls were soft, dense, but the kind that needed patience over speed. When his fingers brushed what he thought was a tangle, a faint warmth pulsed. There and gone, and for just a fraction of a second, Declan felt something that wasn't his own. Safe, sleepy, a hollow space shaped like missing. His hands stilled. He finished the trim. He did not mention the pulse. He also didn't let himself think too hard about what the threads in the queen's hair must carry, if the boys could do that. The next evening, Tessin came back, and he was holding something. A comb, ornate and heavy, carved from something that wasn't metal and wasn't bone. He held it out with both hands. "Mama said no," he said, "but Mama's crying." Declan took the comb. He knocked on Ishvael's door. She opened it, looked at what was in his hand, and her face went the particular kind of cold that means something was hit directly. "My son had no right to take that." Her voice was precise, controlled. "Quayan, you have no right to hold it." She reached out and took the comb from his hands. Her fingers crossed his. The threads at her temple flared. A burst of warm gold light, sudden and involuntary, and she flinched as though it had hurt. The door closed, hard. Through it, silence. Then a sound, low and cracked and unmistakable. She was crying. The comb was on her side of the door. He was on his. And the child between them had made it impossible for either of them to pretend this was just about hair. This one has a 4-year-old, a comb, and a queen crying behind a closed door. Subscribe, Part 2 lands tomorrow. 3 days of nothing. No small footsteps in the corridor. No blanket dragging across the threshold of Suite 4. Declan cleaned his combs, took his appointments, and did not think about the sound he had heard through a closed door. He was very deliberate about not thinking about it. Third night, he was pulling the cover over the adjustable chair when the door opened. Ishvael stood in the frame. No guards, no sun trailing behind her. Her hair was worse than the first time he had seen it, the auburn mass of it unraveling in slow defeat, the bioluminescent threads running through it so dim they were nearly gone. She was holding the comb in both hands, my fingers wrapped around it the way people hold things that are also something else entirely. She didn't speak for long enough that the ventilation hum filled the room twice over. Then, "The last person who braided my hair was Tessin's father." She touched her temple. One thread pulsed, faint and brief, like a word said too quietly to catch. "When he died, the threads went dark. They have not responded to any Korvathi since. Not once." Her voice was even, controlled, and she had clearly decided how this sentence would sound before she arrived. "But when you touched my hand," she stopped, set the comb on the seat of the chair. Her hands were steadier than his were. "I am not asking you as a queen." A pause. Long, honest, a little lost. "I do not know what I am asking you as." She had come without title, without guards, without her son as a buffer between her and whatever this was. She had walked down a corridor in a station ship to a barber's grooming suite and admitted that a human's accidental touch had woken something in her that no Korvathi had reached in a year. For a queen, it was not an admission. It was a demolition. Declan picked up the comb. His hands were trembling. He had cut hair for 15 years. His hands had never done that. He pulled the second chair beside hers. Close, not crowding, the way you position yourself when the work is delicate. Looked at the comb. Did not look at her. "I don't know what Korvathi protocol is for this." His voice came out smaller than he intended. He cleared his throat. "I just know tangles." He gestured at the chair. "Sit. I'll be careful." The word careful came out cracked at the edge. He looked at the comb. She looked at him. She stopped correcting herself when she thought his name. And she had been thinking it for 3 days, though she had not admitted that to anyone, including herself. She sat. A Declan started at the ends. That was the rule. Always the ends, never the root. Work your way up. and it was the only rule he was confident about right now. The comb moved through the lower lengths first, slow, untangling without pulling. He had been trained in patience before he had been trained in anything else. When his fingers first made contact with the threads, the room changed. Not loudly, not dramatically. The threads nearest his hands warmed, a gold light spreading upward through her hair the way sunrise moves, unhurried and inevitable. And then he felt it. Not her thoughts, not words, nothing that clear. Just the shape of what she was carrying. Grief, wide and old and settled in. Relief so cautious it was almost afraid of itself. Fear, the specific kind that lives next to something wanted. And one thing underneath all of it, new and unnamed, that she had not yet found language for. His hands shook once, then steadied. He worked in silence. The comb moved. The threads responded. Not bright, not the full pulse of someone unhurt, but present, waking, slow, the way trust wakes, the way light comes back into a room that has been closed for a long time. The door moved. Tessin stood in the gap, blanket pulled around his feet, copper curls still carrying the shape of Declan's trim from 3 nights ago. As he looked at his mother's hair, at the gold threading upward through the auburn, and he went very still the way small children go still when something is exactly right. He sat down on the floor. He did not say anything. He pulled his blanket into his lap and watched. The mirror held all 3 of them. The boy on the floor, the queen in the chair, the barber behind her with a comb and trembling hands that had steadied. The threads pulsed, soft, rhythmic, warm. It wasn't a choice. Or it had stopped being a choice somewhere between a closed door and the sound of crying and a child who had pointed down a corridor and trusted a stranger with one word. The comb moved through her hair. The threads were no longer dark, and the ornate, heavy, carved thing that had been a locked door and a slam farewell and a demolition confession was now simply a comb, moving through a queen's hair in a small, white-lit room, doing exactly what it was made to do. That comb traveled through grief, through a closed door, through a child's stubbornness, and into a barber's trembling hands. If you felt that, subscribe and come back tomorrow. What moment stayed with you? The boy on the floor or the threads waking? Tell us below.